I'm live now. It's the Nazarite, bringing you Hebrew lore from days of yore. In this week's Torah portion, Balak, it's one of my favorite ones. It's as if the Torah, in the middle of all of the wanderings and the murmurings and the punishments and all that, the Torah kind of takes a zoom out and focuses on an incident that happened in parallel to what was going on with Israel at the time. The king of Moab, Balak, hired a wicked black sorcerer, let's say, a dark wizard called Bilam, in order to help him curse the children of Israel. So this Torah portion has everything. I mean, it has angels, it has a talking, it has sorcery, it has a talking, not a mule. What is it? Yeah, a mule? No, not a mule. The talking donkey, the female donkey. So, and it also has one of my favorite uh, verses in the Torah, and I'll get to that soon. So I love the idea of the Torah taking a zoom out and focusing on something else, while Israel supposedly are not even aware of this going on. They may find out retroactively when things happen towards the end of the Torah portion with the daughters of Midian, but until, hey, shalom, BBQ Network, what's up? So this week's Torah portion is fascinating in the sense that it doesn't focus on the children of Israel. Its focus is entire Shabbat Shalom to you too. Its focus is entirely on what happens next to that. Hey Jordan, nice to see you. And we have a vision. We have this idea. We can see what happens. Meanwhile, while that's happening, simultaneously, the king of Moab hires this dark wizard to curse the children of Israel so he can run them out, lest they come and take everything over, which they pretty much did in the times of Joshua. And well, the actual prophecies, 3 times Balak asks Bilam, the wizard, the sorcerer, to curse them, and 3 times he ends up blessing them. Now, this is a testament to all kinds of things, the power of a one true God, which Bilam also fears. He tells the king, he tells him when he calls to him, I will only be able to say what God tells me to say. I will only be able to do what God tells me to do. I love the portions about the return to Israel. What do you mean the return to Israel? Which Torah portions are those, BBQ Network? Enlighten me. I'm not sure if I get it. Now, the first and second time, Bilam sort of means to curse them, let's say. The third time, it says that it was a little different. You know how they say third time's a charm, and comedy comes in threes, but I'm going to read one verse now, which I just love. The third time, when Bilam is about to curse them, Balak, the king of Moab, sacrifices 7 bulls and 7 rams on 7 altars, as in the first 2 times that they tried to curse them. Each time the location changed. First, Bilam was able to maintain some kind of eye contact. He was able to see the edge of the people, the encampment. And then the second time, he was able to see an even smaller piece of the encampment. But on the third time, he goes up to a higher place. And the verse is from King James, and Bilam lifted up his eyes and saw Israel abiding in his tents according to their tribes, and the Spirit of God came upon him. Now, in Hebrew, it sounds different in King James and in any translations, and I won't say the Hebrew now, but I love the verse in Hebrew, how it flows, and that's basically the right translation. Hang on. I'll read that in a second, BBQ Network. I love the idea of this dark wizard, this sorcerer, who knows God. He knows Adonai. He says, I won't be able to do anything that Adonai doesn't want me to do. That is why he spoke praises and blessings in the first 2 times. And this third time, he lifts up his eyes and he sees the encampment laid out in front of him with the tribes on all 4 corners, let's say, and the temple in the middle and the Levites and priests around it. And it was so inspiring that the Spirit of God came upon him. We are able sometimes to do the very same thing, regardless of intent. Something just captures us and shines before us, and we feel this transcendence. That's the Spirit of God. You may choose to call it energy, you can choose to call it chi, you can choose to call it the Spirit of God. It's this all-encompassing feeling where you can as if the world opens up to you and you can take what you want from it and make it your own. And Bilam sees the encampment, the Spirit of God is upon him, and he decides to bless them, not just because God makes him do it, so to speak, but because he wants to bless them. All right, I'll read this now in the chat. When they were in Egypt, and then they sent people to scout the land in Israel and have to deal with Balak. Right. You mean the return to Israel with the spies, the 12 spies? Yeah, that's a whole other trip. It seems that without that sin of the spies, without them missing the mark like that, it would have been 3-4 days, and they would have been there. But there was something physical and mental and maybe spiritual even about them that wasn't ready. There was they were still kind of in a slave mentality for centuries, at least two. Egypt was their bread and butter, albeit dearly bought, with suffering towards the end of it and for a long part of it, of their stay there. But it's all they knew. It was home. So a few times they decide, yeah, let's go back to Egypt. And the Spirit of God, again, in those times, manifests. It manifests when they want to stone Joshua and Caleb. It manifests when Korach and his posse, his group, does their thing. At times of great, desperation, or when the people kind of start to hit a kind of rock bottom, there's this manifestation of the divine. Bilam, there are the teachings in the Midrash and the external teachings that say and specify what he had to do in order for the Spirit of God to be upon him and for him to be a prophet. It's said that Bilam was equal to Moses. He was Moses' counterpart. He was the yin to his yang. And now in the children of Israel, the father of the prophets is Moses. No prophet was greater. And the ones who came before Moses and after him are linked to him spiritually, to that force that we call Moses, our master, the father of prophets. And nobody rivaled him or equaled him in the children of Israel, since or after, before or after. But in the nations, there was Bilam, who was his counterpart, who had the same power in, let's say, the negative. Now, you can argue that the positive and the negative are in symbiosis, and there's no light without dark. But that's what it was. And Bilam, for the first 2 times anyway, tried to curse them. He wanted to curse them. He was hired to do a job. And Moses, it wasn't exactly like that. They both, Bilam is here forced almost against his will, seeing that wondrous encampment with the temple in the middle and the smoke rising from the incense. It was so amazing. In the middle of the wilderness, this thing that embodies the presence of the Lord. How could he not have the Spirit of God upon him when witnessing that? And Moses, when he murdered that Egyptian back in Egypt, speaking of Egypt, BBQ Network, speaking of Egypt, that was unlike his character at all. It wasn't. It seems that in both counterparts, Moshe and Bilam, and neither was going against the word of God and hitting the rock like we read last week. Bilam messes up here. Moses messed up in the previous Torah portion. It's that part in the yin and yang. You have a bit of yin and yang and a bit of yang and yin, the light and the dark. In the 2 halves, you have a bit of each. And it's the same thing. Moses does something that's seemingly against his character. Bilam does something that's against his character, but they bring harmony and balance. When you see them like that, certainly juxtaposed portion against portion, where he hits the rock here and he blesses his enemies here. It just shows, I think, with every divine leader or master or even Hindu gurus to some degree, and I know this not because I've been, but because people who talk about it, like Alan Watts, no matter how divine a situation is, no matter how divine an individual is, there will always be something there that is of the material, earthly. And even Moses himself died. He didn't live forever. Let's see, I enjoyed visiting Egypt, BBQ Network says, but I was grateful to return. Yeah, I think they did that to form a people. Before that, they were a family, but now they were a people when they got out of Egypt. It gave them perspective. at least in my opinion, perspective that eventually wasn't enough. Something in Egypt was ingrained in them. Something in Egypt was ingrained in them, and they couldn't make the transition to the Holy Land, to the Promised Land, to the land of their fathers. The land of their fathers. That wasn't them. They were slaves, and they saw miraculous things and went through amazing experiences, but I think something in them was still very much something Egyptian was ingrained in them, I suppose. But let's not forget, we're talking about an atmosphere, an environment, a place, a wilderness, and them being wanderers, and the clouds of glory surrounding them, and they have a wellspring in the shape of Miriam, the prophet, that goes with them, and it's not an easy situation. I wouldn't presume to simplify it like that. So Balak cannot believe this. The guy that he hired to curse his enemies blesses them 3 times, and Bilam says it again, I cannot go against the word of God. Whatever God lets me do, I will do. All right? I can't do anything about that. Even evil forces in this world, even the negative, the chaotic, gets its permission from the Most High. God gave, in this natural world, God gave evil its due, its place. We are commanded to do the same. We give Satan, and I mean Satan in the form of evil energies, not the Catholic or even Hebrew Satan right now. We give the devil his due. Now, I'm not excusing, we should always strive to be separated to God in the best possible way, lead a life of righteousness. We shouldn't kick ourselves in the ass for not being perfect. Even Moses killed a guy, even Bilam blessed his enemies. Sometimes when God wills it, and however you want to take that, when God wills it, things happen. I need some water. So I'm going to say goodbye now. Balak and Bilam later were killed in the war for the occupation of the Holy Land, let's say. And, very soon, really. And then later on, it's reiterated in the book of Joshua. Let's have a wonderful weekend and a good Shabbos. And sometimes it's important to know when to do a zoom out. The Torah does it here in this Torah portion, and sometimes it's about gaining perspective. The thing that Balak needed the thing that Bilam, the sorcerer, needed to attain was perspective. He saw a glimpse of the people, he saw the edge of the people, and then he saw the entire encampment, and something happened. When we sometimes when we're able to take a zoom out, things can happen. We see things differently. Being able to make that move is sometimes very difficult because we are very self-involved in a way, not self-absorbed always, but self-involved to be sure. Constantly focusing on us and our needs, and a lot of it is, it has its merit. We need things for survival. We need things even past that. But sometimes to take a zoom out, I know that when I'm angry, when I'm having a bad time, when I'm fighting with my woman, it's really, really important to take a zoom out. You can see things clearer and more clearly, because when you take a breath, you're able to think clearly. Literally, more oxygen comes to the brain. Breathe through the nose, take it out through the mouth. You need 5 breaths, 10 seconds, whatever it is. To take a pause and zoom out of a situation can help. And I pray that I will be able to take a zoom out when it's needed, when it's necessary, sometimes when it's even unnecessary, but I want to do it to gain a better idea of what's going on. And I mean this spiritually, and I mean this physically, but most of all, I mean it when I do things that I know go against my conscience. When I'm angry with really, egocentric reasons, when I'm acting in a way that I shouldn't, when I'm getting worked up over things that I shouldn't, I'll be able to take the time to zoom out and gain new perspective, and maybe also in the situation see the divine presence. Shabbat shalom. I'll see you Tuesday.